Good afternoon and welcome to our channel. Today I'm going to discuss how to file a Section 8 complaint. Now, to be clear, there are many different federal agencies and circumstances in which you can file a complaint, whether it be the landlord, the housing authority, or if you want to address the Department of Justice, HUD, HUD OIG, and many other federal agencies, depending on your situation. Out of all things you can do in terms of federal housing and Section 8, this is probably going to be the most contentious. But I'm going to give you simplified notes today, so you don't need to write anything down. I'm going to put everything in the comment section in the description. But keep in mind, I'm going to give you a simpler guide to this, but for most of you, it's going to be something more complex. And I strongly urge you and recommend that you work with an attorney or a very experienced consultant like with my office, okay? These issues can, again, be very contentious and can result in retaliation and violations of civil rights and many other issues. Okay, things can degrade very rapidly. So that being said, I'm gonna switch over screens. That way, I can give you a little bit of information regarding my company, as I'm my alternative option to an attorney, and also less expensive. I'm gonna move my face off to the right. As you can see here in the video, you got a phone number and web address as well as email. Look, my office is by appointment only. There is a cost to that. I am not free. I don't receive government grants, okay? So do not call that number unless you have an appointment, okay? Moving on from there, let's bring in the notes real quick. So how to file that complaint, Section 8 complaint correctly. The correct complaint process depends on what happens, of course, and many of your cases are very complex, which include hundreds of documents and other filings. And so, as I told you, it's contentious, but we're going to cover a simpler format for those of you that may have a simpler matter. So, under the circumstance, the process depends on what happens, and Section 8 participants should usually start with the housing authority's written process, especially when a decision affects their voucher, rent share, family size, termination, portability, and reasonable accommodation requests. Do not ever rely on phone calls or in-office visits. There's no matter of record. It needs to be by mail or by email. Avoid open debates and conversation without making that part of a formal record. You will trap yourself into something with no evidence. Number one, so looking at some of the potentials here, a housing authority made an incorrect decision about income, rent, family voucher size, voucher termination, or eligibility. And in that respect, you could request an informal review, which is what we often call an informal hearing, if you're an applicant or if you are actively participating. So, in that circumstance, you would want to do a Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, and through that FOIA letter sent to them, you may request their policies and procedures, which would be the administrative plan. Okay. Moving on from there, a housing authority, landlord, or manager discriminated against because of disability, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, family status. That would be moved over to a different federal agency. And so you would be filing a fair housing complaint with HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, better known as FHEO. And of course, among these things, you could also file, if your case includes domestic violence, under rules and policies at the federal level for Violence Against Women's Act, of course. And so that carries a different brand of justice in itself. Landlord refuses to make repairs, unit has health and safety problems, or landlord is violating the lease. You should notify the landlord and manager in writing first. I recommend first giving a notice. If it's unresponded or not responded to within 30 days, giving a second notice in good faith. After that, then you want to force the issue to the housing authority in writing and request an inspection if it involves a voucher assisted unit, okay, or tenant-based housing. When you're dealing with fraud, theft, kickbacks, false reporting, misuse of voucher funds, and serious housing authority misconduct, for most of you, that'll mean that you're dealing with a housing authority that's lied to you or other issues, or they're treating you badly. And in those cases, that falls under one jurisdiction, and that would be to report to HUD's Office of Inspector General. Think of HUD and then think of HUD's police. The police for HUD, or OIG, is pretty much the Supreme Court of all federal offices that handle housing, okay? So Office Inspector General, or OIG. The problem is that HUD assisted apartments, complexes, but not tenant-based. Section 8, you'd use the multifamily housing complaint line for a voucher, okay? To make that clear, HUD assisted means is project-based housing. It means the housing authority is not only issuing your voucher, but they also own the property in which you're renting from, which creates this kind of conflict of interest. So moving on from there, HUD specifically directs the housing choice voucher and public housing residents, in other words, project-based, whether unit manager or landlord issues to their local PHA or HUD's PIH information center at 1-800-955 2232. And you can also contact HUD directly, whether it be regional or DC office at HUD Contact Us. Number two, protect your deadline first. So if you receive a denial, termination, rent change, subsidy standard, or other written notice, here are some of the things that you should consider in those circumstances. Read the notice for the legal appeal deadline, submit written requests for informal hearing or review before the deadline, state that you disagree, ask for the policy and evidence that's relied on, and request a copy of your file, obviously. You need to be very cautious with that, guys, because many of you are requesting just broad information. You need to be very specific in that nature. And again, if you're going to make those kind of requests with your PHA, I strongly urge you to get professional counsel, whether an attorney or a professional consultant, because you're delving in areas that could ultimately create a very contentious or retaliatory issues, okay? And many of these hearing processes, many of you don't know how to get through them, or what to file, or even how to do it, okay? Keep copies of every notice, email, screenshot, and delivery of confirmation. Again, avoid in-office sit-downs and telephone calls. Those are worthless, no matter record. For applicants, a PHA must give prompt written notice of denial, state the reasons, and explain how to request an informal hearing. You can look at the procedures under Federal Code of Title 24, Code of Federal Regulation 982.554 for participants in certain decisions, including income and rent calculations, voucher size, and termination-related decisions. You may require an opportunity for an informal hearing, as we had talked about earlier. The PHA's notice must state the reasons and the request deadline, which would be also written and prescribed under Title 24, Code of Federal Regulation 982.555. You'll hear me reference that quite a bit for that Code of Federal Regulation, because it does cover contentiously a lot of what the feds do outline as policies and rules, okay, at least at the federal level. Number three, what to include in your written complaint. Let's be clear here, okay? Your name, your address, phone number, email, and client or participant number, the housing authority's name and program. So you'd want to indicate if you got a housing choice voucher, or if you're in a subsidy, or if you're in project-based housing, a decision or conduct you are challenging, the dates, names, exact facts in chronological order, the rule, policy, lease term, accommodation request, or notice involved, and what you already did to resolve the matter, and how many times you've attempted to do that. It should always be 2 tries for every issue you're dealing with. First try. If you don't receive a response, try again. 2 established times, okay? Attached notices, email, lease, ledger, inspection records, provide letters, photos, receipts, witness statements, and delivery of proof. Let me give you some keen advice, guys. They're not interested in your life story, okay? And they don't want you to write a novel. That's not the goal here. Many of you are going to try to include 13 different separate issues. Look, that will require you filing 13 separate reports. Do not convolute a case by trying to argue every point and disappointment you have, or fill this information to include emotional tones about how you feel about people and how they feel about you, because that's not going to be relevant to whether or not they can actuate the rules and then also make a determination. So each separate problem you're having should be addressed separately. And again, leave out emotional tones. Do not write a novel. If you need to know about how long these things should go, with all your evidence attached, I would expect a normal letter to be 1, maybe 2 pages, okay? If you're going past that, or you're just simply trying to submit 61,000 documents, many of which have no relevancy to what you're arguing, then you should expect this to fail for you, okay? Number 4, sample complaint and hearing request language. So the subject for the request for informal hearing or written complaint should have your name and client ID if you have one at your PHA or public housing authority. And then I'm going to give an example down there. We're not going to go through all that today. That's a short one. Let's be clear. It'd be better in many cases that anytime you're dealing with requests, hearings, notices like that, it's usually better to deal with a consultant in that respect. We're a very inexpensive alternative to it, and we certainly have written probably tens of thousands of these letters, and it's going to be a little bit more complex than I'm suggesting here, but I wanted to give you all a factual example in case you wanted to try on your own. Number five, when buying with HUD fair housing, use of HUD's FHEO, which is known as fair housing, when the issue involves discrimination and retaliation. For example, remember, FHEO can deal with things like discrimination, retaliation. Well, let's talk about discrimination and retaliation. Discrimination is an extremely high bar. Many of you are going to reach for that one first. Don't do that. It's the toughest to prove. It'd be better to show retaliatory actions or a pattern of harassment than for you to ever try to prove discrimination. I'm warning you, there's a loss rate on that like 98%. There's a much better success rate around 70% when you're arguing retaliatory actions and harassment, okay? Watch how you actually meter your case. So, disability related reasonable accommodation was denied without individual review. A landlord refuses to accept a voucher because protected characteristics or state and local source of income protection law. So different states have different regulations determining what income can be counted towards federal housing. Whether you were punished for requesting an accommodation, report discrimination, or exercising BAWA protections. Just to be clear, anything involving domestic violence has separate actions and rules here and is much more contentious, but it's a lot more winnable than the average case. So do not take this advice as solely guided at BAWA or domestic violence. Moving on from there, HUD allows complaint line. So by phone, you can 800-669-977. I told you guys, and I'll repeat again, these phone numbers are a great thing if you just want to do a quick shout out and hello to HUD. Look, you really want to present a matter record. Having a phone conversation with somebody that's probably tired and have had to pick up the phone 80,000 times a day means that your entire summary of everything you're going to argue on that phone will probably be rolled out in one paragraph, and then it'll be file 13 probably after about a week, okay? I'm not dissuading you guys from using phone numbers, but I'm just telling you that line there is to soothe your feelings. It doesn't actually seem to achieve much that I've seen. So I would always recommend doing this by mail. So it actually has to go under review, and there's evidence of that, not just the other side of the phone line and their narrative lasting approximately one paragraph. Okay. How to ask for the respondent's name, property, program address, dates, description of what occurred. Fair housing complaints generally should be filed within 1 year of the last discriminatory act. You can pretty much hold 1 year as a pretty good guide for almost all processes. If things have happened over a year, then the odds of them wanting to pick it up, arbitrate, or mediate any of this is going to go down significantly if they even accept it, okay? Number 6, when reporting fraud to HUD, OIG, the OIG is for suspected fraud, abuse, mismanagement, criminal conduct, HUD-funded programs, not simply because you disagree with a voucher decision. HUD OIG should only be used for the most serious allegations. You're asking HUD to step in and vote somebody off the island. In other words, somebody in a housing authority is going to get their walk-in papers, okay, if you can prove your case. Only about 1 in 13 cases that we've ever filed through my office actually ever make it to investigation, okay? And so out of clients doing it, probably 1 of every 100 person, okay? So I'm probably 10 times more effective than 100, okay? But I'm not going to toot my own horn there. I'm just letting you know that they're not going to pick up every case, okay? Moving on, their HUD-funded programs. And so you can report HUD IG, but you can call their number. They got 800-347-3735, but you're allowing the operator to, again, narrate it all into one simple paragraph. And don't be shocked if you never get a phone call back, okay? I'm not suggesting they don't investigate, but if you're smart, you're going to do this by mail, okay? Important mistake to avoid. HUD OIG complaints you do not replace the local appeal process and hearing requests. It's just like you pick up your first job at Walmart, okay? And you're the bagger, and you decide somehow the rules have offended you. Somebody's done something. But instead of going through the assistant manager and then the manager and then the store manager, you decide to go and give Sam Walton a call, the man that owns the company. Think of that as OIG. Unless you go through all the formal processes and close those doors, then your case will be rejected immediately. So, in other words, you'd have to serve at a minimum 2 notices to probably even the landlord. And then if it involves the housing authority, an additional 2 notices there, plus informal hearing. And then of that, you'd have to appeal that hearing. And so you see there's probably 6, 7 steps to climb the ladder. A lot of you guys just pick up the phone and give old HUD OIG a call. Oh, well, I haven't complained to anybody. I wanted this to be a surprise. And instead of me going going to anybody and telling anybody, I'm just going to report it to you, they throw that in the trash. Your case was over the minute you picked up the phone. Take my advice here. If you need to better understand the process or what due process all the way through this is, including hearings and notices, written letters, accommodations, and otherwise, then you probably want to reach out to an attorney or a really experienced consultant again, okay? This is, again, among the most contentious and toughest things to deal with when it comes to cases and complaints, okay? Out of all things you can do, the easiest is portability, the hardest is filing complaints, and it's not the filing of the complaint that's complex. It's all the different notices, arguing back and forth, mediating, appealing, and doing informal hearings, and then probably, you could estimate having to have at least a knowledge of a minimum of one grade school book worth of information just to kind of get through that. It's not simple, okay? But nobody's preventing you from just going and arguing as you wish, but don't be surprised if you don't prevail with anything on that, okay? So my office, as always, is a last option, not a first option, okay? You should not reach out to me or consider my office a legitimate option until you tried all reasonable efforts. But because of the circumstance with this, frankly, this is the one thing I recommend you really do reach out to somebody like myself or an attorney because, to be frank with you, you can cook your case from the beginning if done wrong. So most other things, I always tell people to put in their best measure and efforts. But with this one, anytime you're filing complaints, you really do need some professional guidance almost from the beginning. Otherwise, it would require later, if you decide to deal with an attorney or consultant, we have to unwind all that. And the more time we have to go backwards, the more cost there is involved in that, okay? I've enjoyed talking with you today. I hope that you find at least the basic information, okay? The notes will be in the description and the comments section. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you again. Bye for now.